Tamaduni watu na vyopotea kibweke hata vibabu vya kale sasa vinapiga mileke tufanyeje mavazi ya tuje
So when the Maasai were moved from the White Highlands, the so-called White Highlands, because the white people came and they see that these highlands are very productive. So they decided to take it from the community through an agreement, of course, dubious agreement. That's around 1904. The treaty. The Maasai Treaty. The Anglo-Maasai Treaty. So they moved the Maasai further down to less productive areas, dryland areas, where there were a lot of problems. There was no water, it was mosquito-infested areas, so a lot of malaria, a lot of East Coast fever for animals. So the people died, livestock died because of these diseases. And we are still there up to now. And because of that, the big issue, besides lack of enough land for livestock to roam about and graze, because we are pastoralists, nomadic pastoralists. And so besides that, another big issue is the issue of water, because where we are is very dry. You can't get water to be used for domestic use, for watering our livestock. So what we are doing as an organization, I come from an organization called Simba Maasai organization. We are trying to develop water sources as a short-term mechanism to kind of intervene on this big problem. Even though we are still fighting for our historical injustices, including the land that has been taken away, but at least now we are trying to adapt to the new environments that we are in, which are very harsh. So we are trying to develop water sources like wells, earth dams, at least for our livestock, because now we have another problem of climate change. So if that land was kind of it was difficult to stay there, fragile environment, dry ecosystem, if it was that way almost 100 years ago, then you can imagine what it looks like now with all these issues of climate change. I mean, it's horrible. It becomes difficult to live there every other time. So the only way we can adapt to such situations, such environments, is try to develop some kind of short-term mechanisms, develop water sources. And the unfortunate thing is the government is not helping either in developing such essential amenities and infrastructure. So it is upon us as a community to find ways and means to develop these water sources to try and ease the problem that's affecting the community. So we are trying to develop water sources. The water table is very far, it's about 600 feet. And it costs quite a lot of money, about $30,000 to drill one well. So we are not relenting in continuing to fight for our rights to development from the government, right for the restoration of our lost lands, retribution. So we are still going on with the fight. It is going to take a long time, but we are not relenting. But at least we still want short-term mechanisms of adapting to the new situations that we find ourselves in right now, because it's really dire, it's very difficult. People are really finding it very hard to adjust. The issue of policy, the kind of policies we have are very discriminating. They are very biased towards the pastoralists, towards the indigenous peoples and the Maasai in particular, because they are the same old colonial policies which are been purposely tailor-made to alienate land, to exploit, to discriminate, to divide and rule, So those are the same old policies that are even applied. So it's a system of neo-colonialism as it is now. Unfortunately, the independent governments, which are our African governments, the dominant societies, have stepped into the shoes of the predecessors, colonialists, to exploit their fellow brothers and neighbors.
The privileged elitist class.
Classical, differences and scrambling over resources, the literal leftovers from the colonial era. We Africans are still now fighting over it. And in this case, the indigenous peoples are the victims. They are actually the ones who are suffering. They are suffering because they don't have political representation. They are minorities. You can't have the numbers to send somebody maybe to legislative assembly where laws and policies are made. So it means your sound is not heard up there at the realm of the ruling class. So if policies are being made on your behalf to govern you, then we are at the mercy of our enemies. So they definitely make laws that make them achieve whatever they want, and make them, exploit you further, marginalize you. So that's why we find ourselves in the periphery, and we are now subjugated politically, economically, socially. Our cultures are threatened. Even our existence, our very existence, is threatened. Actually, it's really an issue of extermination. It's really an issue of genocide. Genocide doesn't mean that you have to kill people, but this is a slow death. Because if people don't have means of livelihood, then we are just fizzling out slowly by slowly, either being assimilated or even physically dying because of lack of basic needs that we need to survive. So we have a lot of poverty crippling in. Many people are dying. A lot of diseases. We can't afford the medical services. We have lost the land, even to the so-called conservation areas. A lot of huge chunks of our land has been set aside for conservation, protected areas, of which you are not allowed to access. So if you don't access those areas, and they are our dry land, season grazing areas, then you are kind of convicted to slow death. Now we have frequent droughts thanks to climate change, and so the livestock dies every other time. We don't benefit from the so-called protected areas and whatever accrues from them. Tourism in Kenya is the biggest foreign exchange earner.
Big one.
Yeah, and big one. And a lot of wildlife are found. The wildlife that is found in Kenya, over 75% is in Maasai land. But the Maasai are benefiting the least from it. So that has already created a conflict between human and wildlife, the Maasai and wildlife. So our coexistence for millennia, for years, has been so peaceful and harmonious, is jeopardized, is under threat, because we now see the wildlife as a threat. We see them as a liability, not an asset, because they feed on our grass, the little grass we have, the little water we have, and then when the situation is worse, they retreat back to the park, and you are not allowed to go back to the park. So those are the kind of challenges, dynamics that we are going through as a community. So we need a lot of partnership, a lot of coalition from wide and large, all over the world, so that we can fight these injustices of the ruling class, of the minority that are want to maintain the status quo at the expense of the indigenous peoples.
Vyokuja mimi zigi kwa kishindo kama kunta kike mwenye